Now, let me welcome warmly Professor Federico Corniego, formerly from University of Modena, now from University of Bolzano in Italy, who will make the second part of the talk by Professor Hans Fuchs of yesterday about narrative didactics. The chairman of the session is Andrzej, so I switch off and the floor is yours, Andrzej and Federico. Thank you for coming, Federico.
Yeah.
Welcome, Professor, on our conference. Please present us a lecture entitled Examples of Stories of Forces of Nature. And do you have switch on the option share your presentation? Professor Corniego, can you hear me?
His microphone is
I hear you. I am trying to share my screen.
Okay, please share your screen.
Oh, yes, this one. Okay. Do you see?
Okay. Yes, I see. Yes, I see your screen. Yes.
Okay. So,
yes, this is your presentation.
do you see my
Yes.
presentation now?
Yes, I see. I see your presentation. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let's wait for 3 minutes because my talk was provided at 10:15, or do I start now?
Can we start now? Yes.
Okay.
Can we start?
Okay. Another
Thank you.
information. Do we need to have a break so I could shorten a bit my presentation and finish, for example, 11:15?
11:15. Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay.
Is it okay for you?
Yes, it is. It is okay for me.
Okay. So you hear and see well me?
Yes. Very well. Very well. Perfect.
Okay. So, good morning to all of you. I would like first to thank a lot Professor Carvas for inviting me, for his esteem for me and for my work. There is a long-lived friendship between us, which goes back to the Italian years of Greg, when we met in Trento. So I would like to thank the organization of the conference and thank who is attending the lecture. So in my talk, I will work on much of what Hans Fuchs developed yesterday. I hope you were attending. However, I will sometimes briefly recall the key points that are useful for my talk today for that for who of you that was not present yesterday. I hope not to bore you for this. So I will work mainly on two stories, and I will just start my presentation with the outline. I will begin with the introduction, maybe philosophical introduction, methodological introduction. Then I will present you and analyze with you two stories: the Perpetuum mobile story, that is an introduction to energy, and a story of cold, that is a figurative rendering of cold. And then at the end, I will show you how to reach the Apple story. Maybe you have heard about it. So first, introduction. If we want to use story to teach physics, we are well aware ours is a story of physics, one of the many stories of physics we can create. There are stories of physics, not a unique way to teach physics narratively. On the contrary, when you read a textbook, you fail to find the physics. There are different stories of physics, but there is a unique formal physics. Are these two different levels of knowledge, lower the former, higher the latter, or are we in front of a contradiction? Modern cognitive science tells us our mind is figurative. We do not know, understand, interpret, describe what actually nature is, but what images our mind creates to grasp the natural world. Our understandings is not literal, objective, but metaphorical, figurative, imaginative, and formal physics too. Even formal physics is not the only physics, contrary to what it is presented, communicated, handed down to us. So, a narrative approach to physics has nothing to envy to formal physics. The only difference is formalization, a matter of language, representation. So, let's see some stories of forces of nature that drive us to the knowledge of nature. Please interrupt me whenever you want, if you want to have clarification or to give question to me. Please don't hesitate to interrupt me. So, first story, the perpetuum mobile story, an introduction to energy. Let me anticipate some fundamental consideration conveyed by the story before watching it. Then we will see and analyze how the story renders them figuratively. I will just briefly discuss what is energy and what is not. What are forces of nature? I will recall something that maybe Hans introduced yesterday. And what causes phenomena. So what is energy and what is not? The world is not divided into matter and energy. It is like a religious assumption. Light, heat, electricity, motion, and so on are not energy. It is best to understand these terms as denoting phenomena which have three basic characteristics: attention, an intensity, a level of intensity, a fluid amount, an amount, and maybe figuratively a fluid amount, and a power that scientifically corresponds to energy. We will call them forces of nature. So not energy, but forces of nature. Energy is an aspect of forces of nature, a property. It does not exist by itself. What leads our mind think energy to exist, maybe, is that it is common to every force of nature. It's like something that is everywhere, but it remains an aspect of forces of nature. It has a different role than forces of nature. In order to understand the role of energy in natural and technical systems and processes, we need to agree on the following distinction. Forces of nature determine what can happen. And we will see in our movie this in a figurative way. Energy can only tell us how much of this can happen. So only an aspect of the power of our agents. Energy is more like the bookkeeper in a company, not the CEO. Next, what are forces of nature? I just mentioned it before. Let's go back in time when humans could literally see the natural agents and name them as gods. The Egyptians, for example, had the Shu, the god of wind, the wind, Geo, the earth, and Nut, the sky. Forces of nature are wind, water, rain, fire and ice, light, substance, food, and etc. Humans knew, and we now know, these natural agents and we can talk about them and describe them. Forces of nature are characterized by a size and an intensity. They are big, large, much, or they are intense. They are high or low intense. Forces of nature are more or less powerful. Their power is a measure of how much strong consequences on other forces of nature or things they can cause. Size and intensity, the first two aspects, tell us how much they could accomplish. So these three aspects are in a certain way connected to each other. This is a table of natural forces of nature like water, light, heat, water in soil or air, linear motion, rotation, food, what we could call forces of nature in a natural language. And we have the intensity potential for every force and the size amount. For example, water has pressure as intensity and amount of water, the volume, as its size. Light has brightness, has intensity, and amount of light as size. Heat has temperature as potential, as intensity, and the caloric or entropy or amount of heat as size, and so on. In physics, forces of nature are grouped into a small number of categories that had become the physics contents. And this is the list of the few number of forces of nature of our textbooks: fluid, electricity, heat, substances, linear motion, rotation, and gravity. At least macroscopic physics. And as you see, energy is a common feature of every force of nature of physics. We have again the potential and tension aspect, we have again the fluid-like quantity aspect, and the power and the energy of forces of nature. So let's point out what causes phenomenon. We have to agree on this. Size and intensity of a force of nature tell us how much a force of nature can accomplish. Or rather, given its size amount, it is its change in intensity that tells how much it could accomplish. Its fall in intensity tells us how much it can accomplish. Water could drive a water wheel if it flowed, and if it flowed from a high place to a lower place and do its work. It could drive the water wheel of a mill only in this way. There needed to be a difference of heights, a tension, a difference of height, a tension for the water to flow and to do its work. It needed to be tense at first and then relaxed, high and low level. And this is how it could be powerful. Again, if we think to the ancient Egyptian, nothing could happen if there were no tensions. For Egyptian, when the world was created, a first tension was set up. The sky separated from the earth because the wind went between them. Ever since then, the wind, Shu, has held the sky, Nut, above the earth, Geo, ensuring the existence of this first tension. And as long as it exists, life will continue. So, after these small points, some punctualization, let's see the video perpetuum mobile and then discuss about it.
A metaphorical tale for introducing the subject of thermodynamics.
Do you hear and see well my screen?
Yes, we see very good your screen. Yes.
Okay, I continue.
It was supposed to be the best invention ever. The perpetuum mobile, a machine that powers itself. An unending cycle made up of light, electricity, water, and motion. However, the machine initially stands still, at rest in a state of equilibrium. It will need a push in order to start running. The push makes energy go into the generator. This energy is taken up by the electricity, causing its voltage to rise. The electricity uses the energy to make the lamp shine. In turn, this light becomes the energy carrier. At the same time, the electricity flows back to its original level.
Dadurch wird das Licht nun zum Energieträger.
Wherever the light shines on the solar cell, the energy is used to raise the voltage. Unfortunately, the electricity only takes a part of the energy with it. The electricity now drives the pump that forces the water with high pressure through the pipe, leading to a higher level. In the process, it gives its energy to the water and the electric voltage is lowered again. Gravity causes the water to flow downward by itself, releasing its energy. Via the water wheel, the energy is taken up by the momentum of the wheel. The motion carries the energy from the water wheel over the drive belt and wheels to the generator. And the cycle of the perpetuum mobile begins all over again. However, whenever energy is transferred, a part of it gets lost. Eventually, there is not enough of it left over to start the next process. This alleged miracle machine will never work. Written off as a useless curiosity, it might find its way into a glass case in a corner of a museum where it is eventually forgotten. If the room in the museum is not totally windowless, and the machine is positioned just right at a window, a new element can come into play. The sunlight shining on the machine is so strong that the amount of energy it carries is more than enough to drive the electricity in the solar cell, causing the cycle to begin again. The energy that is unused does not get lost. It causes heat to form. As long as the sun shines, the processes continue to run. However, they must accomplish more because much more energy is coming into the machine. The wheels turn faster. The light burns brighter. And it gets hotter inside the glass case. This is because wherever energy leaves the cycle, there is friction causing the heat to increase. As long as the sun supplies energy, the amount of heat will increase, expanding the air inside the glass case, until
Nun hat sich
Hello?
We hear you back. We hear you back. Thank you.
Thank you, sorry. So let's analyze and go back to the story shortly. And maybe if we have time, we will watch it again to better enjoy its feature. Let us make this clear from the outset. The dust in the animation represent energy in the physical processes. The dust, different from any other living ghosts, is energy. Energy is different from every other force that act in this system. This is the first important distinction. Now, there is a machine operating in some way. Apart from motion of some parts, it stays the same all the time. It is the material substrate of the story that is to follow. And the operations, the processes appear to be governed by little ghosts. Like yesterday, Hans anticipated you, our mind is able to make processes that put the material parts in the background and make these ghosts emerge from that background. That is called the figure ground reversal. We see what is not actually there, but our mind is able to see these forces of nature that causes the function of the mechanisms that compose our machine. In the movie, there are electricity, light, motion, water, and heat agents. The agents drive the process, or they are driven, so they can drive another process in turn. Clearly, they control the processes. They are the actors of the functioning of our machine. Moreover, agents appear to be either relaxed or tense. When they are relaxed, they lie somewhere low. When they tense up, they move up and are ready to meet another agent. At the beginning, we have the electricity agents. Here, the electricity is tense. It climbs the wire. And here, electricity is relaxed after giving its energy to light. Here, the next agent is light. He is relaxed. He is poor of energy. And here, the light is tense. He's full of energy. We have water again. Here is relaxed. And here is tense. Is at high level. It is high pressure, maybe. As you can notice, the agents meet in specific places where they are allowed to interact. They cannot interact each other without the help of a mechanism, of a material object, of a system that allow their interaction. So we have lamps, we have generator, we have solar cells, and we have water wheel. The heart of the energy exchange is this. Right at the beginning, we see what dust that was made available to the machine by the inventor does. It makes the first of the agents, the little reddish electricity, spirit. It wakes it. The electricity agent tenses up and move up the wires to the lamp. It has become powerful. In the lamp, it hands off the dust it carried out with it up the wire to the next agent. a light agent in the lamp, which now gets tense and drives the next electricity agent in the solar cells. The first electricity agent makes the dust available to the light agent, so this one can in turn do its job. Note that at the end, the electricity agent relaxed when it handed the dust over the light spirit. This process is repeated for every couple of agents between electricity and light, between light and electricity again, electricity and water, water and motion, and motion to electricity again. In general, there is an agent who is tense and powerful because it has received energy and possesses dust. It is now ready to force the next agent into action. It does so by handing over the dust, thus making the second agent powerful. How much dust can be handed over and how fast somehow measure the power of an agent. As you can see, this story works a lot on visual metaphors. This is the main way this story conveys concepts, as well as, of course, with verbal metaphors too. What happens when between the times when the agents meet? We should assume that an agent that received just from a dust from a first agent as a result of the interaction between the two takes the dust with him on his way to the next agent. It would not make all that much sense to assume that the dust appeared and then disappeared again in the act of interaction of the two agents. So energy is not generated, created, or consumed. It is carried around by the agents. Energy is always the same dust that is carried around by the agents. It does not change form. It does not undergo changes in its nature. Then we have overlooked something quite obvious. The meeting between two agents, their interaction, is never a perfect affair. Some of the dust always falls by the wayside. Technically speaking, we say that the agent that is driven is able to obtain only a fraction of the energy made available by the driving agent. The dust that falls to the ground, the energy which we often call lost, is available for another thing to happen. Heat is created. So energy is not lost, does not disappear, but heat is created and takes it with it. There is a new ghost or agent leaving its mark upon our story. We can call it the heat agent. Moreover, another visual metaphor is displayed by our story. As energy increases in the glass case, the produced heat ghost becomes bigger and bigger. The other ghosts remain little. They change their aspect. They become tense. They are relaxed, but they remain almost the same size. Heat, however, changes in size. It becomes bigger and bigger as energy is lost. Together with heat, or in general with agents, energy is stored. Energy cannot be stored by itself. It will be contained in object together with the force of nature. Since we have not energy, since we cannot have not pure energy, because energy in itself does not exist. It is an aspect of forces of nature. We cannot find energy as it is, but we can find forces of nature contained into objects containing energy. This is the visual metaphor for energy containment, energy storage. There is one more important aspect of dust suggested by the video, even if not explicitly, and maybe all of you was thinking about it. All that happens are these three things. Dust can be made available or be used, it can be transported, and it can be stored. When it falls to the ground, heat uses it. In other words, its amount does not change. The amount of energy stays constant in the world. It is not produced or destroyed. Physicists say that energy is a conserved quantity. So, let me summarize the important feature of energy that this video conveys. First, in interaction of forces of nature, energy is made available by the first agent, the cause, the causing agent, and used by the second agent, by a second agent, the patient. An agent can make energy available only if it is tense. Energy used by a patient, not used up, not lost. Second, energy can be transported. Agents carry the energy they have collected from one place of interaction, a device, to the next. We call the agents so energy carriers. They keep energy with them in their path while they flow. Energy is the same in all processes. There are no different types of energy. Energy is never converted. Fourth, a patient usually misses some of the energy made available by the agent. Energy that is missed by a patient in an interaction is not lost. It is used by a new patient, namely heat. Energy is not produced nor destroyed or lost. There is always the same amount of energy in nature. Energy is a conserved quantity. Even though there is always the same amount of energy, energy can be used only if it has been made available by an agent. This is the energy problem, our worldwide energy problem. The energy problem is not that there is not enough energy, because we received 1,000 times of energy from the sun. The problem is if the agents we are available are tense. An agent can make energy available only if it is tense. We can have lots of energy, but in agents that are not tense, that are low intense. Energy can be stored in materials together with agents and patients that carry energy with themselves. So I would show you again the perpetuum mobile video so we can watch it more carefully and enjoy some feature more.
A metaphorical tale for introducing the subject of thermodynamics. It was supposed to be the best invention ever. The perpetuum mobile, a machine that powers itself. An unending cycle made up of light, electricity, water, and motion. However, the machine initially stands still, at rest in a state of equilibrium. It will need a push in order to start running. The push makes energy go into the generator. This energy is taken up by the electricity, causing its voltage to rise. The electricity uses the energy to make the lamp shine. In turn, this light becomes the energy carrier. At the same time, the electricity flows back to its original level.
Dadurch wird das Licht nun zum Energieträger.
Wherever the light shines on the solar cell, the energy is used to raise the voltage. Unfortunately, the electricity only takes a part of the energy with it. The electricity now drives the pump that forces the water with high pressure through the pipe, leading to a higher level. In the process, it gives its energy to the water and the electric voltage is lowered again. Gravity causes the water to flow downward by itself, releasing its energy. Via the water wheel, the energy is taken up by the momentum of the wheel. The motion carries the energy from the water wheel over the drive belt and wheels to the generator. And the cycle of the perpetuum mobile begins all over again. However, whenever energy is transferred, a part of it gets lost. Eventually, there is not enough of it left over to start the next process. This alleged miracle machine will never work. Written off as a useless curiosity, it might find its way into a glass case in a corner of a museum where it is eventually forgotten. If the room in the museum is not totally windowless, and the machine is positioned just right at a window, a new element can come into play. The sunlight shining on the machine is so strong that the amount of energy it carries is more than enough to drive the electricity in the solar cell, causing the cycle to begin again. The energy that is unused does not get lost. It causes heat to form. As long as the sun shines, the processes continue to run. However, they must accomplish more because much more energy is coming into the machine. The wheels turn faster. The light burns brighter. And it gets hotter inside the glass case. This is because wherever energy leaves the cycle, there is friction causing the heat to increase. As long as the sun supplies energy, the amount of heat will increase, expanding the air inside the glass case, until now the cycle has been broken. The sun brings energy. It is transferred from process to process, and it is distributed without increasing or decreasing, and is finally carried by the hat back into the atmosphere.
Okay. So, would you like to ask some question now, or we continue and put the question at the end?
I think that you can continue, and the question will be at the end of the lecture.
Okay, perfect. So let's go
Yes.
to the second story, the story of cold. a figurative rendering of cold. This second story is a little bit different from the first one because it deals only of one force of nature, the cold. The cold. This story in particular works mostly on verbal metaphors as well as visual metaphors, contrary to the previous story that worked mostly on visual metaphor as well as, of course, on verbal ones. So let me recall something and deepen something I already hinted about forces of nature. The aspect of forces of nature are quantity or size, tension, and power. Since we are going to see a story that works on language, I would like to point out how language displays these figures, convey these figures. So we use words in our narrative, in our natural language, that are actually figurative metaphors, figurative metaphorical expressions that take from a few number of images. Let's list them. The agent, the first aspect of agent, or the size, represents the quantitative or the extensive aspect of a physical phenomenon. And we conceptualize this with the fluid-like substance metaphor. We speak about the volume of fluids, amount of heat, charge, electric charge, as a substance that can flow, that can move. The agent expresses a certain level of tension. This represents the intensive aspects of a force, and we conceptualize it with the scale or verticality metaphors. And we say that we have a temperature scale, we have a pressure scale, we have high or low pressure, temperature, humidity, and so on. Finally, the power of force is recognized when the two forces interact. The causes force, the agent, is called agent, of course, and the other is called patient. And we conceptualized in our language this third aspect with the direct manipulation metaphors. Let's say that we are not often aware that we are using these metaphors, because language gives us the tools of speaking such a way. Let's notice that the three aspects, the three elements of a force of nature are already contained in the form of our speech. For example, adjectives. We speak of levels and tension as high or low. So an adjective connected to a noun in our natural language describes its strength, its intensity, its height. The nouns in our speech, actually mass nouns, describe the quantity aspect of a phenomenon, quantity of fluid, quantity of heat, of motion, of substance, humidity, light, electricity. All these nouns, heat, fluid, motion, substance, are mass nouns. They are not plural. There is not the plural of heat or motion, of substance, of humidity. And then we have verbs in our speech that describe the power of these agents. The power as a measure of how strongly an agent influences another. For example, heat drives the motion of an engine. Sunlight combines with water and air to produce sugar in photosynthesis, etc. So verbs express the power of the agent and how it interacts with the patient. Let's see some example of expression about heat categorized respect to level, tension, fluid-like quantity, and agent power, these three metaphors. For example, from level tension metaphor, we can say experiences indicate that many levels of hotness exist, or temperature is a property which measures the degree of hotness or coldness of body. These are sentences that were collected from the internet, not just created now. The thermal tension of a thermogenerator depends on the temperature difference across the element. There needs to be tension between hot and cold so that Pinot Noir can ripen slowly and show a true and exciting expression of the site. Seem to intuitively think of heat as a liquid and the temperature as level of the liquid. These are metaphorical expression of the metaphor of level, verticality of the intensity of a force of nature. Then let's see expression about the fluid-like aspect of a force. The object serving merely as a container of heat. It is something that is contained. Thicker bodies store much heat and take longer to cool down. While the fluid is swelling and ripening, the plants will want abundance of heat and air. Geothermal adds-on for heat pumps on the market today collect heat from the air to the ground or the ground. Heat is a substance like fluid that can be collected, that flow like water. Heat flows downhill. The greater the difference in temperature between two objects, the steeper the hill and the faster the heat will flow. And finally, let's see some metaphorical expression about the metaphor of agentiality. Just try frying an egg to observe the transforming power of heat on proteins, or the force of heat within our planet, and so on. As we have shown, their experimental program centered on the force of heat, blah, blah, blah. Heat, an agent of change, although it is known that heat is an agent which causes damage to DNA. Fire can be a clever opponent. Her research provided insight into how heat behaves as it is conducted through rock. So, after this introduction of about the metaphorical expression of heat, I would like to point out this question: heat and cold, or only heat? There is an important difference between a direct experiential and the imaginative approach to phenomena as forces of nature and a scientific treatment of phenomena. Our experience of the polarity of hot and cold, of hotness and coldness, leads us to imagine hot and cold as separate agents. The perception of hot and cold is relative to our bodies. Hot is what is warmer than we are, cold is what is colder. Intuitive field physics, folk physics, allows us to work with hot and cold as separate but related forces. It turns out that we need to work with only one of the two pairs of qualities and quantities in physics, either hotness heat or coldness cold, if you want to create a formal science of thermal phenomena. In physics, we have chosen hotness, heat as a conceptual pair to work with. This is the point about this duality, heat and cold. So let's watch the winter story video and then analyze it.
A small town called Little Hollow lay in a hollow surrounded by a high plain. People had settled in that place because small streams collected on the plain and flowed down into the hollow and through their town as a nice, gentle river. This, the people of Little Hollow liked a lot. But there was something they liked a lot less. Winters in Little Hollow were harsh. As the last of the warmth of late fall left the plain surrounding Little Hollow, cold found its way into the area and spread out. Because the plain was so wide, the cold of winter had to spread pretty thinly, so it was not all that cold up there. Moreover, even in the midst of winter, the sun managed to send some warming rays onto the plain. The snow that fell on the plain was not so cold either, but it was plenty, and the people of Little Hollow loved to go up to the plain for cross-country skiing. The little kids went there to build beautiful snowmen. But in Little Hollow, things were different. The cold of winter knew a good place where it could do its job much more easily of making everything and everybody cold. It could flow into the hollow where the town had been built. It could collect there, and it knew it would not be driven out so easily by a little bit of wind as could happen on the plain. And the sun could not reach the town that easily, also because of fog that often lay over Little Hollow and made everything grey. More and more cold could collect in Little Hollow, and it got colder and colder as the winter grew stronger. The temperature fell and fell. The people of Little Hollow cursed winter and its cold. They knew that the cold would find its way into their homes like a hungry animal if they were not careful to close windows and doors. The cold could even sneak in through tiny cracks between walls and windows, so the people in Little Hollow had learned to build their homes well and put in strong wood-burning stoves. At times, when much cold had collected in the town, when it had become terribly cold and the temperature was very, very low, the fires in the furnaces had to work very hard to fight the cold that had made its way inside. The people in their homes made sure that fires roared in the stoves and that the heat they produced would balance the cold. For the children of Little Hollow, the cold of winter was not so bad. They dressed warmly so they could keep their body heat in, and they played hard when they were outside. But even for them, the thick cold of winter had mischief in mind. It went into the snow lying on the ground to make it very cold as well, and this made the snow drier and harder to work with. The children could not form snowballs, and it was much more difficult to build snowmen. They had to wait until winter had grown somewhat tired, and the cold was slowly driven out of Little Hollow. When there was less cold and the temperature was a little higher, the snow became warmer and much more fun to play with. When that happened, the cold of winter knew its time had come. The warmth of early spring would grow stronger and drive the cold out of the hollow. The cold knew it had to accept its defeat, but it also knew very well it would be back.
Okay. So let's start again with our presentation. So let's analyze some sentences, some expression, some linguistic expression of our story. Of course, there are also visual metaphors in the story, because we have again this ghost that represent heat and cold. You have something that flows, that you have images of containment. The little hollow is like a container. Yes, but let us analyze the language of the story. So let's see first the fluid-like substance metaphor for cold. For example, the cold found its way into the area and spread out. Is an expression that means that cold is something that moves and moves like a fluid. Because the plain was as wide, the cold of winter had to spread pretty thinly. Spread. Fluid spreads. We use the same verbs that we would use for a fluid, but it is not an unusual way of speaking about cold. It is a normal way we speak about it. It could flow into the hollow. It could collect there. The cold could even snake in through tiny cracks between walls and windows. It can snake. So, cold as a fluid substance. Again, the second aspect of the force of nature, degree of cold is a vertical scale. Winter in Little Hollow were harsh, were very hard, were very cold. So it was not all that cold up there. In that case, cold is not the substance cold, but is the level cold. It stands for temperature. It was not at all so low temperature there. And it got colder and colder as the winter grew stronger. The temperature fell and fell. Again, temperatures something is something that falls. It is a vertical scale. It is not an horizontal scale. It is not stuff. Why cold as a substance stuff is something that is big or bigger or smaller. Temperature is a scale that is high or low. And in our language, this is transparent. When it had become terribly cold and the temperature was very, very low, we don't say that temperature was very small. Does not sound well, because temperature, because intensity in our imagination are levels, like in physics. And then the third aspect, cold is a powerful agent. For example, the cold of winter knew a good place where it could do its job of making everything and everybody cold. Could its job of making, and so on. It went into the snow lying on the ground to make it very cold, as well as this made the snow drier and harder to work with. So cold makes something happen. It knew it would not be driven out so easily by a little bit of wind. So cold has a power, and wind does not win. Wind does not win against cold. The fires in the furnaces had to work very hard to fight the cold. Again, cold has a power, and to fight its power, we have to have a strong agent, at least strong like cold. So I would show you again the video of the winter story and invite you to find out in your mind our other expression that with this expression that I showed you, make our imagination imagine cold as a force of nature, and make our mind to understand how cold behaves, interact with things. What is the character of cold?
A small town called Little Hollow lay in a hollow surrounded by a high plain. People had settled in that place because small streams collected on the plain and flowed down into the hollow and through their town as a nice, gentle river. This, the people of Little Hollow liked a lot. But there was something they liked a lot less. Winters in Little Hollow were harsh. As the last of the warmth of late fall left the plain surrounding Little Hollow, cold found its way into the area and spread out. Because the plain was so wide, the cold of winter had to spread pretty thinly, so it was not all that cold up there. Moreover, even in the midst of winter, the sun managed to send some warming rays onto the plain. The snow that fell on the plain was not so cold either, but it was plenty, and the people of Little Hollow loved to go up to the plain for cross-country skiing. The little kids went there to build beautiful snowmen. But in Little Hollow, things were different. The cold of winter knew a good place where it could do its job much more easily of making everything and everybody cold. It could flow into the hollow where the town had been built. It could collect there, and it knew it would not be driven out so easily by a little bit of wind as could happen on the plain. And the sun could not reach the town that easily, also because of fog that often lay over Little Hollow and made everything grey. More and more cold could collect in Little Hollow, and it got colder and colder as the winter grew stronger. The temperature fell and fell. The people of Little Hollow cursed winter and its cold. They knew that the cold would find its way into their homes like a hungry animal if they were not careful to close windows and doors. The cold could even sneak in through tiny cracks between walls and windows, so the people in Little Hollow had learned to build their homes well and put in strong wood-burning stoves. At times, when much cold had collected in the town, when it had become terribly cold and the temperature was very, very low, the fires in the furnaces had to work very hard to fight the cold that had made its way inside. The people in their homes made sure that fires roared in the stoves and that the heat they produced would balance the cold. For the children of Little Hollow, the cold of winter was not so bad. They dressed warmly so they could keep their body heat in, and they played hard when they were outside. But even for them, the thick cold of winter had mischief in mind. It went into the snow lying on the ground to make it very cold as well, and this made the snow drier and harder to work with. The children could not form snowballs, and it was much more difficult to build snowmen. They had to wait until winter had grown somewhat tired, and the cold was slowly driven out of Little Hollow. When there was less cold and the temperature was a little higher, the snow became warmer and much more fun to play with. When that happened, the cold of winter knew its time had come. The warmth of early spring would grow stronger and drive the cold out of the hollow. The cold knew it had to accept its defeat, but it also knew very well it would be back.
Okay. So the third story is the Apple story, but I invite you to download it from the FCA Go toolkit. Maybe Tiziana and Michele yesterday told you that is a story that is one of our main material for our FCH Go project about fuel cell introduction into schools. So let's I invite you to follow the link and download and work with it and maybe analyze it metaphorically, both for visual metaphor and for language metaphors. So at the end of my presentation, I would like to tell you that all what I told you is contained in these two papers. The first one was the first time I met Hans Fuchs in Modena, Reggio Emilia, in our first conference about innovation in didactics of sciences for primary school, where he gave his very interesting first talk to that conference. And then after that conference, our collaboration did not stop. And the other paper I took from is The Power of Forces of Nature, How Narrative Introduces Us to the Notion of Energy. That is a paper again presented to the 2019 edition of that conference. And the paper is from Hans Fuchs, Elisabeth Dumont, and myself. I will give these papers as well as my slides to the organizer to give them to whoever wants. So thank you for your attention, and this is a list of possible readings for you.
Thank you for the nice and very interesting lecture. Thank you for your great job. And now is time for questions. Czy macie Państwo jakieś pytania? Czy ktoś chciałby zadać pytanie? Można po polsku.
Can I ask the question?
Okay.
It's Kamil Fedus, Nicholas Copernicus University. Maybe I will show myself. So thank you one again for this very nice and illustrative way of introducing us to this new approach to teaching nature science. Please, could you explain us in more details why do you introduce this way of teaching? What's its advantage when compared to traditional didactic of science? Myślę, że nie ma pana profesora.
Okay, would you like to translate it into Polish or?
Sorry?
Would you like to translate your question into Polish or?
No, I don't have to translate it. I think everybody understood.
Okay. Thank you for the very interesting question. What are the advantages? First, I am interested particularly in primary physics education, means for kindergarten, primary school in particular. So stories are very welcome, are much enjoyed by little kids. So this is the practical way. But there is another important issue about this narrative approach. If we want to convey the large public what is physics, what is how to understand nature, how physics teaches us to understand nature, we have to find a way our mind is useful to grasp. So our mind is narrative in nature, is not formal. We don't think in terms of formulas, of course, but we don't think in terms of statements. We think in terms of figures, of images, and the images are conveyed by a narrative language. Of course, they are conveyed also by formal language of physics, by equation as well. But in this case, the language is formal, is far from our common people everyday language. As I introduced with the first slide, narrative language has nothing to convey to formal language because the content is the same. The difference is the form in which is developed, in which is conveyed. So, of course, not all stories are useful for science education. You have to do well-crafted story. You have to create stories according to maybe important rules, particular rules. But if the story has as character a force of nature that acts and suffer adventures in the story, you will be able to tell the behavior of this character in a way that is it is an introduction to a scientific way of speaking about it. So the point is that there is a very strict connection between narrative language and formal language. That is our figurative mind. Don't know if I answers.
Sure, I'm very satisfied with this answer. It's clear. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question?
If you don't have questions, I have a comment. I will translate into Polish immediately because we made teaching physics very formal. And we say that there is a heat, there is no coldness. So we can't say that coldness is moving. But this is nowadays physics, which is very formal. I have here Cartesius' Principles of Philosophy. He started speaking about physics, and he says about the movement of bodies that something has velocity and something has slowness. Now we use velocity, we don't need slowness. But Cartesius was not a stupid guy. So probably the way of his thinking is also the way of thinking of children now. So we could use a more narrative language to enrich our tools. Now, to samo po polsku. Proszę Państwa, Cartesius, który nie był pośrednim filozofem, w zasadach filozofii mówił o szybkości, ale też powolności ruchu. My używamy języka bardzo formalnego, ale w ten sposób fizyka staje się hermetyczna i jest nielubiana. Czyli czasem warto wyjść w kierunku tej narracji. So thank you again, Federico, because it was a wonderful and very useful for us lesson. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Federico.